World War II saw some of the most unexpected truces ever. Enemy soldiers once stopped fighting to save innocent lives together. One winter night, both sides suddenly laid down their weapons. And one truce involved a castle under siege by both armies. These weren't just ceasefires. They were moments when humanity broke through the darkness. But what you're about to hear will change how you see war. Enemy soldiers once stopped fighting to save innocent lives together. December 1944, the forests of Belgium were frozen and deadly. American soldiers were trapped. German forces surrounded them from every side. But something unusual was about to happen. A small cabin sat between the two armies. Inside was a woman named Elizabeth. She lived alone in those dark woods. That night, she heard a knock. American soldiers stood at her door. They were lost and freezing cold. She let them inside. She gave them food and warmth. But then another knock came. This time, it was German soldiers. They were also lost in the snow. Elizabeth opened the door again. She looked at both groups of men. Her next words would change everything that night. What she said made enemies put down their weapons inside her home. Elizabeth raised her hand. She spoke with a firm voice to both sides. "There will be no shooting in this house tonight." The Americans stared at the Germans. The Germans stared back at the Americans. Every man had a weapon. Every man was trained to win. But Elizabeth didn't move. She stood between them like a wall of courage. "You can all stay," she said, "but you leave your hate outside my door." Slowly, one by one, the soldiers nodded. They sat down at her table. Enemy soldiers, sharing the same room, eating the same bread. That night they talked, not about war, but about home and family. They showed each other photos of their loved ones. They laughed a little. For a few hours they weren't soldiers anymore. They were just young men far from home. But morning came, and reality was waiting outside that cabin door. One winter night, both sides suddenly laid down their weapons. When the sun rose, the truce was supposed to end. Orders were still orders. But something had changed inside those men. They had seen each other as human beings. The American soldiers prepared to leave first. The Germans stood and watched them go. No shots were fired. No orders were given to attack. Elizabeth watched from her doorway. Her courage had created something impossible that night. The soldiers walked away in opposite directions. They returned to their units and the war. But none of them ever forgot that cabin in the woods. Years later, some of those men found each other again. They became friends after the war ended. They called it the Christmas truce of the cabin. But it wasn't the only strange truce. Another moment of peace happened in a very different place. This time, it involved a castle and a battle nobody expected. And one truce involved a castle under siege by both armies. May 1945, a castle in Austria called Itter stood on a hill. Inside were important prisoners, French politicians and generals held by German forces for years. The war was ending, but these prisoners were still trapped and in great danger. A brutal group was coming to harm them. Time was running out fast. Then something incredible happened. American soldiers arrived to help, but they were too few to defend the castle alone. They needed more men. But where could they find help in enemy territory? The answer came from the most unexpected place. German soldiers, former enemies, they decided to join the Americans that day. Together they defended the castle. Americans and Germans fighting side by side against a common threat. But the attack was fierce, and the castle walls wouldn't hold forever. The battle at Castle Itter was intense. Shots echoed through the stone walls. American and German soldiers shared ammunition. They protected each other's positions without hesitation. One German officer named Gangl fought with incredible bravery. He saved American lives that day. The prisoners inside helped too. They were elderly men, but they refused to hide. Everyone worked together. Language didn't matter. Nationality didn't matter anymore. For hours they held their ground. The attackers kept coming in waves. Then reinforcements finally arrived. American tanks rolled up the mountain road toward the castle. The siege was broken. The prisoners were saved. Tragically, Officer Gangl was struck down during the final moments. He gave his life protecting others. After the battle, American soldiers honored him. They recognized his courage and sacrifice that day. It was one of the strangest battles in history. Enemies became allies in a single afternoon. But these weren't the only times soldiers chose humanity over orders. Throughout the war, small truces happened in quiet moments. Soldiers on both sides were human beings. In North Africa, British and German troops sometimes shared water wells. The desert heat didn't care about politics. They would drink at different times. An unspoken agreement kept everyone alive in that burning sand. In the Pacific, medics on both sides sometimes helped wounded enemies. It wasn't ordered, just done quietly. These moments were never in official reports. Commanders didn't know or chose not to see. But the soldiers remembered. They carried these memories for the rest of their lives. Some historians believe these small truces were more common than we think. War creates harsh rules and boundaries, but humanity finds cracks. It slips through when people meet face to face. These stories remind us of something important, something we forget too easily today. So why did these truces happen when everything pushed soldiers to fight? The answer is surprisingly simple. Soldiers saw themselves in their enemies more than in their leaders. A young German soldier missed his mother. So did the American boy across from him. Both were scared. Both wanted to go home. Both were following orders they didn't fully understand. When they met in person, the propaganda fell away. They weren't monsters, just tired young men. Distance makes it easy to hate. Closeness makes it almost impossible to keep hating someone. That's why these truces happened in close quarters, in cabins, castles, and shared desert wells. The men who gave orders were far from the fighting. They never saw enemy faces up close. But the soldiers on the ground did. They heard enemy voices, saw enemy fears clearly. And sometimes, just sometimes, they chose mercy. They chose to see the person, not the uniform. These choices changed lives, but history almost forgot them completely. Most of these truces were never written down. They existed only in memories and private conversations. Soldiers didn't report them because they feared punishment. Helping the enemy was considered betrayal, even temporarily.
But decades later, some veterans started sharing their stories. They wanted the truth remembered before they passed away. Historians began collecting these accounts. They discovered dozens of similar moments across different battlefields and war zones. These stories teach us something powerful. War doesn't erase humanity, it just tries to hide it away. Even in the darkest times, people can choose compassion. They can see beyond the uniform and flag. The strangest truces of World War II weren't military strategies. They were acts of simple human decency. They remind us that peace isn't just about treaties. It starts with individual choices and small, brave acts. These soldiers showed us the way. Even when everything said to fight, they chose to be human first. These weirdest truces World War II ever saw changed history forever. Strange truces WW2 soldiers made prove humanity survives anywhere. Unusual truces during World War II remind us peace is possible always. Famous World War II truces and odd ceasefires WW2 created show courage comes in many forms. Rare World War II truces, wartime truces, stories, and unexpected truces in war teach valuable lessons today. True stories, strange truces WW2 hold power even now.